This is 2/3 of the Washington Monument. 35-story building. 6.2 million pounds to get back 13,000 pounds. The little guy there. That's the capsule. Just that little piece. Okay? All right, so what do we got? Well, the top is on launch. If there's a problem on launch, this pulls the capsule away and saves the astronauts. If you make it up in launch, then this blows away and gets out of the way. Okay? This is 7.5 million pounds of thrust. All right? First stage gets you up a couple of Mach numbers, a couple of miles. Second stage gets you to 100 miles, 15,000 miles per hour. Getting ready for entry into Earth orbit. Third stage is the little guy there. Third stage gets you into orbit. It has to fire twice. It gets you into a 100-mile orbit at 17,500. And when everything checks out okay and you're ready to go on the moon lunar trajectory, it has to fire a second time to get you 25,000 miles per hour on your way to the moon. All right? Once that's done, that drops away, and you are now on your way. And what you have is the command module, the service module, and the LEM in this housing. Well, the housing, once you're on your way to the moon, the housing gets away. And what you now have all right, this is the command module. Okay? This is the service module. Service module provides 3 people, oxygen, power, removes the CO2. It does everything needed for these 3 people to survive. And they could survive for 2 weeks. Okay? So that's the command module, the service module. We then have the lunar module. We have 2 stages to the lunar module. And I'll show you how that works. But when this is launched and the shielding breaks away, what has to happen, and here's where the rendezvous and docking comes in. This has to turn and hook up with the lunar module. Then it heads to the moon this way. Right? When it gets to the moon, it reverses and it fires, so it slows down, so it gets captured by lunar gravity and it goes into a lunar orbit. Now, when they're ready, when the 2 astronauts are ready to go to the moon, they get out of the command module and go into the LEM, into the top stage of the LEM. All right? The 3rd astronaut stays in and stays with the command module, continuing around the moon. These 2 go down to the lunar surface. The astronauts are in the upper ladder. They go down, they gather, they go back. This fires. This stays on the moon. This comes back to lunar orbit, hooks back up. The 2 astronauts get back in the command module. This gets left in lunar orbit. This comes home. When they get to re-entry, everybody's here. They get lined up. They get rid of this. They make sure that the heat shield is facing the right way. They come down. The parachutes open. They're in the ocean. All right? All that has to happen is 135 separate steps have to be done successfully. Okay? And that happened. They did it. It went beautifully. Not only that, but Apollo 12 did just as well. 2 more astronauts on the moon and back. Apollo 12 did just as well. And now we come, of course, to Apollo 13. And what happened with Apollo 13, I think you've all seen the movie. But what they were in this configuration on their way to the moon. They had checked out okay in Earth orbit. They were on their way. There was no turning around. I mean, you can't just do this and come back. You're underpowered to take you to the moon in that trajectory. Now, the lunar module was designed for 2 people for a week. The command module was supposed to keep the astronauts safe. The explosion occurred in the service module. They lost just about all the oxygen. So now, the 3 astronauts had to get in the lunar module designed for 2, and they had to survive around the moon and back for 4 days. If you've seen the movie, you've seen all the engineering that needed to go into how you keep 3 people alive in an environment meant for 2 people. And they had to cut back on power, they had to cut back on temperature, they had to redesign the CO2 removal, all that you saw in the movie. And so they went around, they came back. Now when they get back to re-entry, they have to hope that there's still enough power in the command module to get it started so that they can reorient it so that the heat shield will work and get them through re-entry. And that was the big unknown until they came out of it. They were okay, and they landed in the ocean. It was an amazing amount of engineering that they were able to accomplish in that time period. Okay, so Apollo 14, 15, 16, 17, all successes, all 2 people on the moon. That meant that there were 12 astronauts who have walked on the moon. Nixon administration decided NASA should be doing something else. There was hardware for 20. They could have gone 18, 19, 20. But the Nixon administration says, NASA, go, and they started the shuttle, and they shut down Apollo after number 17.